Just because you live in rural America doesn't mean you can't have entrepreneurial dreams and make those dreams come true. And we are about to prove it. Brought to you by Ranch House Designs, the powerhouse behind America's rural marketing. You may live in a small town, but you can do big things. Here's your host, Harley Gable.
Hey there, I'm Harley, and welcome back to the Heartland Hustle. Today we're diving deep into the world of food, family, and farm law with none other than the incredible Cari Rincker, author, podcaster, single mom, former Aggie, and all-around legal powerhouse. Cari is from Shelbyville, Illinois, a small town in central Illinois where she was raised on a seedstock operation. She traveled around the country getting degrees and practicing law, and then founded Rincker Law in New York City. She founded her practice as a firm that handles everything from the complexity of food law to family matters. Cari has some exciting projects coming up that Ranch House Designs is so proud to be involved in, and our Amazon storefront sells her family law issues in agriculture under the Ranch House Favorites tab. Cari is so passionate about her practice and the work she's doing. Summarizing what Rincker Law does is not easy. Cari's practice covers so many specific areas that the best way to learn about the details of her work is to go to her website at rinkerlaw.com, which I'll link in the show notes, as well as the other projects that you should check out. Without further ado, let's get into it and learn about today's Heartland Hustler. Hi, Cari. It is great to have you on Heartland Hustle. I'm so excited to speak with you today and about all of the amazing stuff that you are doing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, would you start by kind of introducing yourself and your background?
Sure. My name is Cari Rincker, and I am from a very small town in central Illinois. I grew up on a beef cattle farm, and from there, I studied agriculture. I was actually a livestock judger in undergrad. I went on and I judged at Texas A&M and got degrees in animal science there. I am now an attorney. I do a lot of food and agriculture law in addition to family law. So my joke is I do both horses and divorces, but I'm also a little bit of a creator. So I have my own podcast. I've written books. I have a blog, and I guess I can't keep my hands still. Probably the biggest thing that I'm proud of right now is I'm actually a mother. I have a mother of two small children, and so I reside now in my hometown in Shelbyville, Illinois.
So you had a similar start to myself. You are a Texas A&M University graduate. You started and got your bachelor's in animal science. And then it was during an internship, the Agricultural and Natural Resources Policy, ANRP, which I feel like every ag major on West Campus knows of. That is what brought you into your law career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people growing up had, in comments had said, oh, maybe you should think about going to law school or you should go be an ag lawyer. But the truth is growing up in a small town, I probably only knew one lawyer my entire life, and so I didn't even know what lawyers did. But, when you live in Washington, D.C. and you're on Capitol Hill, there's lawyers all over the place. And I was really just ingrained for the very first time about law and policy. I was living at the Georgetown law dorms and walking to Capitol Hill every day. And I just fell in love with being in that industry, with law and policy, but specifically on how it affected our food and agriculture system.
Understand. So you're the beef operation that you grew up on, was it like a commercial type thing or,
No, we are still a seedstock operation. I grew up showing cattle through 4-H, FFA, and the American Junior Simmental Association. It's interesting that you asked that question because I think for myself individually, I foresee me sort of more pursuing a commercial side of things over the long term. I'm getting really more involved with selling beef direct to the consumer, with custom processing and things like that. I'm very envious of Rachel Cottrell with her freezer beef, enterprise there. So I look up to her quite a bit there. So it's interesting that I kind of straddle the line. I grew up in the seedstock industry. My family still has that, but I still have very much commercial beef goals.
Okay. That direct to consumer, I bet you're, I would imagine that there is a whole legal realm to that people don't understand, especially if you're like transporting that direct to consumer over state lines. I bet a lot of people need your advice on that before going into it.
Yeah. What's funny is I actually make my consumers sign a contract, and I think I'm probably the only one, or I feel like I'm the only person that does that. So people sometimes are giving me a bit of weird eye, like, why are you sending me a little contract? But it's true that there's a lot of legal implications. Like, for example, I've learned that when you sell that beef direct to the consumer in a custom processing way, they actually can't even donate the meat product. So there's just a couple little nuances here and there that take some special consideration.
Donating meaning like, is that just in Illinois or is that nationwide?
I think specifically in Illinois, so, because it's a state by state regulation there. So, but yeah, I think it's an interesting consideration.
Very interesting. So after you did the ANRP program and you were like, all right, I'm on the hill, this is what I got to do, that led you into grad school at the University of Illinois, correct?
Yeah, I had already planned on going to grad school. I actually have a master's degree in ruminant nutrition. So, at that point I had already committed, but, part of me was really interested again in going to law school and trying to figure all of that out. But I
Mhm.
really enjoyed my graduate school experience. I think it makes me even a better attorney now. I look at, cases and scientific documentation a little bit different when they come across my desk. So I think it was a useful experience, but I didn't ultimately go down that road.
I understand. And then you go into law school at Pace University. At that time, did you know that, the food family, that was what you were wanting to specify in?
I did. And I also really got the bug for the East Coast from
Mhm.
living in Washington, D.C., and specifically, more of an urban climate. And so I did feel a little bit like country goes to town there. So I didn't immediately go to Pace. I actually was a transfer student from Regent in Virginia, and they're a Christian law school. And so I did my first year in Virginia, and then I transferred up to New York. And, I'm actually getting ready to go back to New York City again. I hadn't been there for about a year and a half, and I lived in New York in total about a decade of my life,
Wow.
and it has really shaped me in a lot of different ways. I'm very, very thankful for that experience. I mean, ultimately, I feel really grateful that I'm back to having a yard and being around livestock again and all the things. But there's a lot of great things I do love about New York.
Yeah. I see from one of your past interviews, you had a quote because somebody asked you, like, isn't it hard to practice ag law in, the biggest city in the United States? And it's like, well, if you have a computer, I can represent anybody. Thought that was
Totally. And what's funny is that quote was pre-COVID, right? But I feel like even now in a post-COVID world, you can really, really be anywhere. And it's really has helped actually, people who live in rural communities because it's a little bit of an access to justice situation. You could hire an attorney that is not necessarily in your backyard,
Mhm.
that maybe is in their wheelhouse to help you in a specific legal issue. So I think technology in a lot of ways is really useful to people in rural communities because of the access.
I see. Okay. Well, and you have, I mean, you're based in Champaign, Illinois, and also in New York City, but you also have the ability to work in New Jersey, Connecticut, in Kentucky, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I am licensed in a lot of different states, including Texas. And so what's interesting about the law is that if it is a federal issue, it does not matter where you're licensed in. So there are some things that I do that are federal issues. An example would be trademarks. So I do trademarks for farms, and it does not matter where they're located. I mean, they could be in Oregon. I'm not licensed in Oregon, and I can help them. Another example might be helping deal with federal farm program issues, crop insurance disputes, so on and so forth. So it's a federal law issue. It does not matter where your attorney is licensed. Immigration is another example. But if it is a state law issue, then absolutely the attorney needs to be licensed in that state. But what I love about the legal community, or more specifically, the food and agriculture community, is that I feel like I have a resource of attorneys around the country. So, recently I was contacted by a farmer who's in California. I'm not licensed in California, nor am I going to ever probably be licensed in California, but I can just work with a California licensed ag lawyer and I can assist that farmer. So, I really love that part of the legal industry, that it does allow attorneys just to work with attorneys that are licensed in that state.
Very cool, like a refer type system. Tell me, so you had some time in Wyoming, and that's when you decided that you wanted to start your own practice in New York. Expand a little bit upon that.
Yeah, so I graduated from a law school in New York, and law school is a little bit of a train. And I get contacted by a lot of people that want to be an attorney or be an ag lawyer. And one of the pieces of advice that I give to people if they're interested in going to law school is to think about where you want to end up ultimately. Because when I was there out of New York Law School, I was educated on New York law. I learned New York civil procedure, for example. I was trained to take the New York bar exam. And so I decided to stay in New York afterwards. But then I just really got hungry for wanting to do food and agriculture law. That basically led me to going to Bud Fallon law offices in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I really had, in a lot of ways, a fantastic experience with them. They do a lot of federal lands litigation, which for a Midwestern girl, this was very different area of the law. Like, we don't have any federal lands in Illinois really where cattle are grazing. And so in a lot of ways, it was a really useful experience. But ultimately, I think what it did was it opened my eyes to what I really wanted to do, was to do both food and agriculture law and then also live in New York City. So, yeah, at the time, at least, the only way that I knew to do that was to do it on my own. And so I got in my Utah van and road tripped across the country again. And I set up shop in a studio apartment on the Upper East Side. I got my first business cards. I believe Ranch House Designs, worked on them for me. And I did document review at the time. And so for anybody who's interested in starting a business of any kind, you need to have a game plan for money. Okay. So a law practice is a type of a business, but whether or not you're opening up a cookie shop or your own law practice, you need to have a plan for money. You either are going to need to be earning money, you need to have a spouse or some kind of a partner who's bringing in the money so you can start your business, or you need to have a lot of savings. And I didn't have the second or the third, so I worked. And so I worked during the day, and then I started my law practice on nights and weekends. And then about a year and a half later, I had basically built up a full-time law practice.
Wow. And you said, okay, it was, I think, 7 years ago that you made the move back to Shelbyville, or no? Have I read that wrong?
Yeah, that's about right. So about December of 2016, about 2017 was my first time where I was actually kind of set up in Illinois. So I originally moved back to Champaign, Illinois, and I've had my Champaign office there since 2017. I only very recently closed it down as of about a month or so ago. So that's very recent. And as I'm sitting here today, I'm in Shelbyville, Illinois. I'm here basically in this office. It's right by the courthouse. And it's a pretty special, I think, circle of life for me to be here with my family, raising my 2 kids, practicing law in the town that basically grew me up, so to speak.
Talk about full circle. You've been just about everywhere. I mean, you made like a loop.
I did. But, I think I love that I'm here in my hometown. And frankly, I feel that now that I'm especially living in a small town, it's so important that we have good people, good professionals in rural communities. Like, we need people to come back to rural communities and to help serve people, but at the same time, I do think that my experiences going away for school and education and internships have helped me become a better professional to help me now serve the community that I grew up in.
I'm sure. I'd imagine it gives you a whole new perspective that, you couldn't necessarily got had you stayed in there your entire life. But I thought that was interesting what you said earlier about, growing up in this community, how there was like the one lawyer. And I think that's how a lot of small towns are, is you have your one local lawyer and all they do is estates.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's not an uncommon problem. I mean, I don't know how things are everywhere around the country, but I know in Illinois, and I think in a lot of rural communities from state to state, that that rural communities are considered underserved, when it comes to their access to justice or attorneys. I know oftentimes it could be the same thing with the medical profession. So it's just really important that we have good professionals that are able to come serve our rural communities.
You're definitely doing that. So expand on your practice. So you say that it's food, farm, and family, and your website, it is crazy. All of the, you're kind of doing it from conception to death in some ways. Some of the things on your website is, it's even like, let me get the exact words. Fertility and assisted reproductive law.
Yeah. And that is an area of the law that, it's interesting that I became interested in that area of the law because in the last few years, that's something that I've personally have experienced as a mother, my own fertility journey, and things. But what's interesting is that this also agriculture, right? So like I do embryo transfer agreements for cattle farmers. I mean, it's kind of the same deal, just different species, different terms there, but it's all in that same animal science or arena, right? And anyway, so I think that's what I've really appreciated about not only being an attorney, but being an attorney who owns their own law practice, is so I could do the types of law that are interesting to me, including now fertility law.
It's pretty crazy. You have picked, and then linking even like the fertility to ag fertility is wild. It's crazy. That's full circle. Animal science. Yeah. You are also an author. I'm going to read them off because they're a mouthful. And I think there's only one book in your repertoire that I could probably read. And that goes to the farm. But you have A Guide for New York Farmers and Food Entrepreneurs, Onward and Upward, A Guide to New York Divorce and Family Law Issues, Family Law Issues in Agriculture, which is on the Ranch House Designs Amazon storefront because I've been thinking about buying it. And then Commission on Genetics Resources for Food and Agriculture, as well as your children's books. I mean, how do you...
I take great pride in those books. My very first book, I actually co-authored with Pat Dillon. He is an Iowa agriculture attorney. And, for anybody listening out here on this podcast that is interested in starting their own book, I can tell you that, it's really not that daunting of a task. Like how do you eat an elephant? You eat it one bite at a time. How do you write a book? You write it one chapter at a time. And so, when I'm trying to write a book or edit a book, you should see me. I literally have piles of each chapter. I'm grabbing a chapter. I want to edit this chapter. And it has been a fun undertaking. But I think the children's books were my favorite by far. Little poems about my son. And I'm currently... My first children's book was Jace Goes to the Farm. The second one was Jace Goes to New York, that just came out. And I'm currently writing my third, which is Jace Becomes a Big Brother. So,
oh my gosh, that is so exciting. So something that's super cool that you're doing is that you have a podcast.
So I do have a podcast. I haven't recorded any new episodes this year. But the episodes are up there. I think there's around 56 episodes or so. It's on YouTube. You can also go to aglawtodaypodcast.com and you can see the library there of the recordings. It was done through Purdue University. I'm very thankful to them for that opportunity. So there's some good interviews there. A lot of them are with fellow ag lawyers about a myriad of agriculture issues. I'm getting ready to start a new podcast. So I'm pretty excited about this endeavor, but it is called the Billable Mom. And I'm going to start recording episodes in January. So I'm excited about that endeavor because I have discovered that being a working mom, whether or not you are an attorney or not, is hard. It is really hard. And, on top of that, I'm a single mom. And so time for me has become that much more precious. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation with other working parents or specifically other working mom lawyers about, how we do it.
I have seen the logo. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to actually get to listen to everything. And then I've been listening to your podcast episodes for Ag Law Today, and they are a wealth of information accompanied with your blog, which I was like, I don't know how many pages this is. You have been updating this blog, I don't know how many times a week since 2009.
I know. I feel like I'm like an OG, blogger here, back before blogging was, cool. So, I actually really owe a lot of my success and the infancy of my law practice to my blog because of the search engine optimization that it gives me. So for anyone who's out there like, oh, should I have a blog? Should I have a YouTube channel? Should I create videos? Should I have a podcast? The answer is yes, you should try it. Whatever platform works for you. And not only do I like putting quality content out there, but for any entrepreneur that's listening to this, I've also found it really helps with the Google SEO.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have, thousands of blog posts, but they really cover everything. I'm just reading these off right here. Business law, what you need to know about articles of organization, what you need to know about paying employees. It's crazy the amount of knowledge you have. And I think it really showcases everything that your law practice encompasses. Very cool.
Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate that. And, Ranch House Designs an awesome job designing my website on WordPress. I'm a big fan of WordPress. I think that they do a really, really great job.
Hey there, hustlers. It's Erin here, one of the marketing specialists at Ranch House Designs. Each and every day, I provide free sales consultations to people just like you looking to have a new logo or website created for your small business. From sleek and modern to classic and timeless, we understand the power of a great logo and website. Our logos start at $500 or $800, and websites usually run from $1,000 to $2,000. But of course, every quote is custom, and I'd love to visit with you. Just head over to ranchhousedesigns.com or give us a call at 979-532-9141 to get started. Talk to you soon, and until then, keep hustling.
Do you want to kind of go into it's hard to narrow down everything that your law practice does, but kind of some of the stuff you emphasize on?
Sure, absolutely. A passion of mine right now is working with farms on their estate and succession planning. And in terms of like the big picture there, I look at it also with business planning as well. You're going to have a big, 500-foot view about what's happening there. But I really am passionate about helping multi-generational family farms and agribusinesses go through that transition. And I can tell you, I am part of my own family farm, and we're having those tough conversations ourselves on how things are going to succeed from my parents to my brother and I. And they are hard. They are hard conversations for us, and they are hard conversations for my clients. But I feel really impassioned about helping people navigate that. So that's one major area. Another area that I do concentrate on is just business law, and that's also pretty big in and of itself. So, I'll help with business formations, helping people maintain corporate formalities. I help them maintain, getting contracts in line, getting employment handbooks, employment contracts, even some trademarks are kind of like a sister to business law there. And a family law, sort of the elephant in the room, is I do help people with divorces. So if they're going through a divorce or a separation, but a topic that is also near and dear to my heart is prenuptial agreements. So I feel like I need a t-shirt that says, I love prenups, but I really do. So I think that they're great, especially for people in the food and agriculture industry. When you're dealing with a family asset, I think it makes sense sometimes to have those challenging conversations with a prenup or a postnup.
You have a quote that I read somewhere. It was saying that when, legal trouble, I'm paraphrasing, when there's legal troubles between businesses, usually the relationship is dissolved. But for a divorce, you have to co-parent afterwards. And I would imagine that same philosophy applies to your family law, in that these people, like for your estate, this is a family you're working with, and it requires a degree of sensitivity. Because yes, it's a business, but it's also, there's a level of trust that you have between people, but at the same time, everyone needs to be protected. Is that incredibly difficult to balance?
It is hard. I mean, I love mediation, and the quote that I state, you are exactly right, that when two businesses go to war against each other in court, you don't expect for them to do business with one another afterwards. And so how can you expect two parents to co-parent together after they go to war in court? So we really have to work hard as a legal community, especially to try to get people out of the court system as much as we can. And mediation is one mechanism to do that. So mediation with divorce and separation. I know some mediators also help families with prenuptial and postnuptial agreements. Some mediators even work with farm estate and succession planning. I've only recently have discovered that mediators will also deal with probates, which is interesting too, because, I think when a family member dies, you think that there's drama when people are going through a divorce. When a family member dies and people start fighting over money, that's when you can really see the skeletons in everyone's closet. So, but a mediator helps pull that dispute out of the public record, right? And really help preserve the family relationships. I mean, you really hit the nail on the head there. And I think when you're dealing with any kind of family or family business, that the preservation of the relationship needs to be top priority.
Yeah. Are most of your clients, would you say, from a rural community?
Yeah, I would say that that's absolutely the case. When I lived in New York City and I was there full time, I mean, that percentage of people that were there in New York versus a rural community, it was different than what it is now. But yeah, absolutely. I think I work with a lot of farm families and people who are in small towns across the country.
Is it a whole different approach to them than you would have to your New York clients?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I guess I just never really thought about it that way, because if I'm working with an urban client and it is still a multi-generational business, perhaps it's a multi-generational restaurant, right? It's just as emotional and the family is just as interconnected in a lot of different ways than that multi-generational family farm. So I think it's really the family interconnection that is the same, whether or not you're in a rural or an urban community.
Yeah, the dynamic and the difficulties travel wherever.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So cool. So some of the other things that your law practice is doing, you said like business law, and then tell me about the food law. I got to know about this.
Well, I tell my team that sort of one of my lawyer goals is to become a food truck lawyer. So, I'm not there yet, but I don't have food truck clients at this point in time, but the food space is actually really just a nice area that sort of segues with agriculture. I have some farm clients that are also, they have farm to table restaurants, or perhaps they're selling product at farmers markets, or they have a cottage food operation in their kitchen and they're making jams and jellies and they're selling them direct to consumer. I've done some food labeling reviews as well. And I'm also getting more into the wine and vineyard space, which has been a lot of fun in multiple ways.
Oh, so cool. I'd imagine there's a whole amount of federal alcohol laws and that you're having to deal with there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you mentioned that you can do, throughout the nation, because that is, you said it was federal, the intellectual property.
Yeah, that's right. So, and some of my clients have, it's interesting about trademarks is they are per country, right? So it's a federal trademark. So I do have some clients that have international trademarks. So I've actually worked with, let's say, a Canadian solicitor on filing a trademark in Canada. But yeah, so generally speaking, trademarks are on the federal level. You can also do trademarks at the state level, but so long as the mark is being used in interstate commerce, then, to have that additional federal protection is the way to go.
Potentially a dumb question. Is there any intersection between like cattle brands and trademarks?
Ooh, you know what? I've actually have never been asked that question. And I would look at a cattle brand sort of like a logo or a design mark. And so I have yet to be asked to trademark a cattle brand, but I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, how would a cattle rancher feel if they knew that somebody else used the same brand? I mean, they wouldn't like it so much. But what's interesting is that everyone actually has uh, ownership of intellectual property on a common law level. So Rincker Law, for example, is the name of my business. So it is my brand. It is not registered with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, but it is my brand. And so if somebody else potentially down the street wanted to start this, a same law office using the same name, Rincker Law, I could send them a cease and desist letter and say, no, 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 I was here first. And, so I guess similarly with cattle brands, you wouldn't necessarily have to have them be a registered trademark in order to have that claim to intellectual property, but it does strengthen it quite a bit that you would have the rebuttable presumption that you were first in right and first in time.
Well, that was out of dumb curiosity, but I'm glad that there's a legal.
Yeah.
You had a really cool Ag Law Today episode that you did about renewable energy leases. And I happened to listen to that because I live in an area that has a ton of solar and wind farms in South Texas. It's like a huge thing. And I was just curious about listening to that and how you were advising people that you should absolutely get those things checked over before you sign off on any paperwork.
Oh, for sure, right? I mean, you're signing an agreement that's going to affect you and probably your children for decades, so at least get it reviewed by an attorney. Oftentimes, not always. I don't want anybody to I listened to that podcast and she told me I could get attorney's fees, but oftentimes you can negotiate attorney's fees in those contracts. So just food for thought there. And also be thinking about collective bargaining power, talking to your neighbors, maybe even forming a informal or formal landowners association to negotiate directly with the wind or solar energy company.
Oh, okay. So that is an option?
Yeah, it is absolutely an option. So, I think that for some energy companies, not all, they want more acreage, right? So if you're able to sort of lock arms with your neighbors and be on the same page with these legal issues, you could collectively hire an attorney to negotiate on behalf of 3, 5, 10, 20 different landowners.
Very cool. I never would have considered that was an option, but it's super interesting. Well, Cari, it has been absolutely amazing speaking with you. What's in the future? What's up? Besides the Billable Mom, which I'm eager to hear, what's new for you?
Well, I have been teaching at the University of Illinois and teaching mediation and things. So I think I'm going to spend a little bit less time teaching so I can dedicate more time with just being a mom and trying to juggle it with being a lawyer and having my own podcast. I'm so excited for the podcast specifically and giving a voice to women that are, raising children and practicing law.
Absolutely. And where will we be able to listen to that?
Well, I want to say everywhere, but I think it'll be on iTunes and Spotify and Google Podcast, YouTube, etc. So I created an Instagram account at the Billable Mom. So please stay tuned on that Instagram and Twitter and Facebook also with that same handle, the Billable Mom.
So cool. Cari, it's been amazing learning about everything that Rincker Law does and everything that you have accomplished as a billable mom. It is It's been great speaking with you, and we're so excited to see everything that's coming up.
Thanks so much.
You've been listening to Heartland Hustle. Our passion and mission of this show is to prove to rural America that you too can have huge entrepreneurial dreams, that you have the same opportunities that anybody else has. We have guests on that have done it, and we get them to spill the beans on the good, the bad, and the ugly. So maybe you can avoid some of those pitfalls. Thanks for listening to the show. Be sure to like, rate, and review it. The show is brought to you by Ranch House Designs, the powerhouse behind America's rural marketing. You can learn everything about us, what we do, and how we can help at www.ranchhousedesigns.com. There's nothing intimidating about making your dreams become reality. See you next time.